Opening credits. Ava and Carol Detective Agency, The Haunted Mansion. Written by Thomas Lockhaven, with Emily Chase. Edited by Dave Aretha. Narrated by Amy Johnson. Chapter 14. Carol's Plan. The night burst into a flurry of activity. From the safety of the lair, Carol took Detective Edwards step by step through her plan for catching the crooks. Ava could tell from the look on his face that he was amazed at how Carol had connected all of the individual pieces of evidence on the crime board. While Carol worked her magic, Ava called Gladys, asking for her help. She gave the group a thumbs up as she hung up the phone.
"She'll meet us at the museum and have everything ready," announced Ava.
Derek was busy on the phone as well, grabbing the last piece of the puzzle that would complete the operation.
I promise.
He nodded his head as he talked.
"Yes, sir. Thank you so much."
"We got it," Derek smiled.
"Mr. Roberts will drop off the cleaning van at Green Central parking deck in 30 minutes.
"Perfect,"
said Carol, nodding.
"My dad is on the way over with his car. Detective Edwards is going to drive us to the parking deck where we'll meet Lieutenant Norris and his men."
"So we're all hiding in the cleaning van?" asked Ava.
"Yep, we'll all hide in the van, which will take us to the delivery zone behind the museum. There's a massive canopy over the delivery area. We'll be able to sneak into the museum without being seen,"
said Carol.
"I must tell you I'm extremely impressed," said Detective Edwards, smiling. "I may have to replace my team with you guys."
"Don't you guys have to do tons of paperwork?"
asked Ava.
"Oh, yeah," nodded Detective Edwards. "We have reports for everything, even reports for reports."
Ava looked over at Carol, whose eyes were glassing over.
"Reports,"
Carol whispered dreamily.
"Carol, snap out of it. Sorry, Blake. I mean, Detective Edwards. We're more like bull in a china shop types of detectives. We wreak mayhem, break a few things, and then quietly walk away."
"So close,"
sighed Carol, shaking her head at Ava.
"So close."
"Oh,"
added Ava,
"I forgot to mention, we always get the bad guy."
"Or girl," added Derek.
"Or girl,"
smiled Ava.
"We have a certain image to uphold."
"Okay," said Detective Edwards, glancing at his watch. "That was a little more than I expected. Let's get this show on the road."
"This is going to be epic,"
smiled Ava.
"Absolutely epic."
Chapter 15. Worthington Tunnel Exhibit. 10:17 p.m. Worthington Tunnel, Hancock Museum. Ava, Carol, Derek, and what appeared to be Livingston's entire police force stood at the entrance to the Worthington Tunnel exhibit. A 4-inch thick glass enclosure surrounded the opening to the tunnel. A podium in front of the display contained a detailed map of the tunnel system. Gladys motioned everyone over to the podium.
"This red dot designates the Worthington Tunnel entrance."
She traced her finger along the map.
"You'll need to follow this passage until you reach the main tunnel."
"Are there any markings? Anything to navigate by?"
asked Detective Edwards.
"No need,"
said Gladys.
"This passage will take you to the main tunnel. You'll make a left."
Gladys moved her finger up the map.
"For about—"
She paused while she counted the little lines on the map that designated 20-foot sections.
"About 600 feet.
"Anyone have a 600-foot ruler?"
laughed one of the police officers.
"You don't need one,"
answered Carol.
The average adult walking step is about 2.1 feet. So once we reach the main tunnel, it will be about...
She paused, doing the math in her head. 285 steps, smiled Derek.
Oh, you stole Carol's thunder,
winked Ava. What? My dad's a banker, laughed Derek. Numbers are in my DNA.
Your number's gonna be up if you mess with her moment again, said Ava, making air quotes.
So, said Detective Edwards, we follow the first passage, make a left at the main tunnel, walk 285 steps, and we should be there.
Exactly,
nodded Gladys.
There's a small passage that leads directly under Archie's collectibles.
Perfect, smiled Detective Edwards. Sir, I have a question, said Officer McCoy, looking pale and worried. Why are we taking the tunnel? I mean, couldn't we just use the cleaning van? He shrugged. Ava looked at the police officer. A thin line of sweat glistened across his forehead, just under his spiky blonde buzz cut. Someone is not a fan of dark and confining spaces, thought Ava. 2 reasons. First, we know that they're surveilling their targets via a drone. If they see anything suspicious, they're going to cut their losses and vanish. Secondly, they're not going to break into a building that's occupied, said Detective Edwards. Okay, nodded Officer McCoy, sounding defeated. Our biggest hurdle is going to be the grate that is used for drainage in his restoration room. Archie said that there's a massive lock on it, and as far as he knows, it hasn't been opened in over 50 years. We'll have to cut through the lock, breach the grate, replace the lock, and get into position before the suspects arrive. Won't they be suspicious if they see a new lock? Asked Officer Lewis. No, thanks to Gladys, replied Detective Edwards. She has given us a beautiful lock from the 1950s. Unfortunately, he said, turning to Gladys, they're probably going to melt it into a pile of glob.
It's a small sacrifice for the greater good,
smiled Gladys. Derek nudged Ava. Someone's an Avengers fan. Once we're in position, continued Detective Edwards, we'll wait for the suspects to enter Archie's. Once they're inside, I'll send an alert to Lieutenant Norris and Officer Lewis. They'll position themselves below the grate in case the suspects attempt to escape back into the tunnel. What about the drone operator? Asked Officer Davis. Ava and Carol both recognized Officer Davis from the bank. She was short, compact, and athletic, with a fiery stare that could melt ice. Officer Tiny and Wilkes will be stationed half a mile away in separate cruisers. Once the suspects are in the store, we'll alert them to move in. The drone operator should be close by. Any more questions? Asked Detective Edwards, eyeing the group. Good. Get your gear on, check your radios, and we'll get moving. He turned his attention to Ava and Carol.
We know,
said Ava.
We hide in the reading room until either you or another officer comes to get us.
Exactly, he smiled. No exceptions.
Yes, sir,
said the trio, nodding in unison. All right, barked Detective Edwards as he stepped into the tunnel's entrance. Let's do this. Gladys punched a code into the alarm box connected to the enclosure and then unlocked the heavy glass door. She gave Ava and Carol a big hug.
Be safe,
she whispered, her voice filled with worry as they disappeared into the tunnel.
If you're enjoying Thomas Lockhaven's audiobook content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.